Well, hello, everybody. I see we've already got James in the chat. Thank you so much for popping in right away. Today, we have a fantastic guest, Daniel Braum. I just actually recently finished, last night actually, his collection, Underworld Dreams, which was very, very good. How are you, Daniel? How's it going? Anything new?
Doing great. Nothing too new. Just taking hesitant steps outside of my house into the world is kind of feeling new. But besides that, just feeling good to be alive and happy to be here.
Just used to being inside, and now that everything's opening up again, it's just, that one step at a time kind of thing, right?
Yeah, a big emphasis on one little step at a time for me.
How's it going where you are? Because I know a lot of the US, they're starting to have to remask and everything.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I live in the surrounding area of New York, and in New York, and New Yorkers seem to be, on the whole, taking it seriously and doing well. But even that said, I'm still not happy with what I see, even here, even though I'm told around here is the best. So it's still pretty scary for me. But grateful to be in New York, and grateful to everyone who's taking good care.
Absolutely, absolutely. Taking that. I
Yeah.
always say I'm not hiding under a rock, I'm hiding behind it. So I'm being cautious, but I'm still living.
Oh wow. No, I'm like under 10 rocks for sure.
You've buried into the ground by now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm halfway to Australia. Let's put it that way.
Hey, that sounds like a good vacation. Let's go.
It
Well,
does. It does.
Well, perfect. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, a little bit about you, and a little bit about your work, whatever you want to talk about the most, or really pinpoint or promote.
Oh, well, I'll just take the opportunity to say hey to everyone. Thanks for coming to Nichi's show. My name is Daniel Braum, if you haven't read my work yet. I'm a writer of genre fiction. I'm published under the horror umbrella, but I think of my work, anything that's not true, I think of it as fiction. So my work is pretty interstitial. It's pretty in between the lines of all the different genres. And for newcomers, I usually say that the best pop culture reference or touch point to my work would be like the old Twilight Zones stuff. It's like my stuff. It's more like the quiet horror, and a lot of the stories are emphasis with that tension between the psychological and the supernatural, giving you that kind of a feeling. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And the most, like Nichi said, the most recent book is Underworld Dreams. It's my third collection, and what I like about this one is it's real. I really dove into that Twilight Zone focus. So most of the stories in that book are really, if I did my job right, the fun of it is like, was that real? Was that in someone's mind?
Mm.
So yeah, that's it in a nutshell there.
It does. The stories really play with your mind at parts, and you have to kind of sit back and question whether you're understanding this right, which I really like. It gets the reader thinking, and it really becomes interactive. And sometimes you have to stop and sit and think, and it really gets the gears turning. I really enjoyed it myself. I do want to pop up who is in here so we can say hi to everyone. We've
Yeah,
got
see, yeah. Thank you for that. No, thank you to Oliver. Yeah, thanks for liking the title. Yeah, it's also the title. There's a story called Underworld Dreams as well. It's the title story. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the introduction that you have, the how to stay afloat when drowning, was just captivating right from the start. And I know when you were on Jason's channel, you guys had talked a little bit about how it touches on suicide, and how it felt for you to write that piece or to write that part. But it was beautiful, and it was a great way to start off the whole collection.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean yeah, it's a bit of a dark story, but it seems to be one that I worked hard on it, and I felt good about it, and I'm happy that people seem to be, despite the darkness of it, that people are enjoying the story, that story. I mean, that's another thing about my work, is that even though a lot of it does steer into or drives through a lot of dark territory, yeah, it's something I've been thinking about recently. Although I definitely feel like my work, I would call the work dark fiction, and it's definitely horror. Um, I'm still after something more than the scares or the depression or that darkness. I think ultimately the point, I'm not sure there is a point, but what I like about after you take that trip, I'd like to think the stories will maybe give you something about humanity or about life without being preachy or overt. You know, I can't even say what they are, but I hope there's still a little bit of ray of wonder and hope in the stories, despite the ground that we do go through in them.
It's true. Life's not all, rainbows and fluffy stuff. So,
Yeah, not for me.
and
Hello, Linda's World of Books.
we've got Andreas that's in here. James is in here. Jason
Oh,
is
hey,
here.
Andreas. Hey, Jason. Hey, James. Some familiar faces there. Thank you for coming. Hello.
Yeah, absolutely. No, everyone's popping in saying hi. If anyone has any questions in the comments, let me know and pop it in there, and I'll pop it up on the screen for Daniel. I do want to say, Daniel, I did read through this collection. I finished it last night. And your descriptions, your detail into the world, into the setting, into the characters, it just brings the whole atmosphere together. You can picture everything from taste to touch to scent. It really captivates you and pulls you into the story. So, I mean, right off the bat, when it comes to writing, you have one heck of a talent. Absolutely. Do you find it hard to dive into?
That's really kind to say. Thank you so much.
Do you find it hard to get into those details, or does it just come naturally for you?
That's the part I think that part comes naturally. I mean, a lot of my writing process is not natural in terms of that. A lot of it is, I guess, what I call intentional, or it's a lot of it that I have to really dig into and work hard on. But I think what that aspect that you talked about was what got me into reading and writing in the first place. So I think that's the most fun part of it for me as a reader and as a writer. So if it's hard, I don't feel the pain on that part of it. You know, I think that's kind of that's the part that that's invisible or comes. Yeah, maybe it does come natural. I didn't think about it that way, as opposed to like some of the other things, aspects of story, or some over the years, over the decades, showing my age. I could see how when I first started out, you know, I've been writing for 20 years now. I'm like, how can it be? I'm only 21. But yeah, some of those other aspects were things that initially just weren't working for me in my early stories, and things that I had to work on, and things that I do consciously work on, you know, even right now when coming up with a story or a project.
Well, then clearly you're a natural and you've got a talent, and you should just keep putting it out there. You said you've been
Oh,
writing
thank you
for
so much.
you said you've been writing for a while. Has writing always been, like a passion of yours? Did you always know that you wanted to be an author?
No, I mean, I knew I always wanted to be a reader, and always was a reader, and always loved story, and those things go pretty closely hand in hand. Um, I a lot of the times my storytelling, you know, as a kid and as a teenager and as a younger man, I was a musician, and a lot of the stuff came out through bands and through music. And then maybe halfway through my life so far was when at some point I did switch over to having the main creative outlet be writing and the short story. And then, yeah, about 20 years ago, I decided to look into publishing in earnest, to say, okay, hey, yeah, what can I do that's more than just writing the short story and showing it to a person or two, and just started going to conventions and learning about what fiction means in the world today. Like, you know, I went to a workshop to do that, and it's kind of embarrassing to say it now, because we're in this amazing time for writing. Like, my to read pile, just the books I physically own, I'm going to go to my grave. I'm going to be buried in a giant pile of them and not be finished. And as depressing as that is, it's also like not depressing at all, because I'll never be bored. It's such a golden age of amazing authors out there. But it's embarrassing to say, like, about 20 years ago, I went into this workshop and I didn't know any of it. I wasn't plugged in. I knew Tolkien, and I knew like Stephen R. Donaldson, and I knew Stephen King, and I knew Clive Barker, who are amazing, and I love them all to death. But I was like, yeah, there's nothing else besides them. Ha 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 ha, ha. And
Little did you know.
20, little did I know, little did I know. Like I literally crashed into it. And when I say crashed into it, one of my instructors for that workshop was the great Tim Powers. I'm not sure if you've read any Tim Powers work. I hadn't at that time, and I'm always very skeptical. I'm the Dana Scully in the X-Files equation. So I'm like always skeptical of authority, and I'm like, Tim Powers, why is everyone saying this guy's so great? And the day he arrived to our workshop, a bunch of my classmates and I, we were like riding on these bicycles, and like they didn't have brakes, and we were going down this hill, and Tim was getting out of his car, and it was literally like a teacher-student crash up kind of thing, which is like my explosion into the world of great fiction. And I say that because once I took the workshop, and Tim was an amazing teacher, and when I went home and picked up his books and started reading them, so not only did all his lessons hit me, but I was just like, had that childhood excitement about reading again, like oh my God, I have to finish this book. I have to read everything this guy's written. So yeah, I'm just rambling on about how much I love reading. So
no, that's okay. Yeah, absolutely. We can all relate. And it's just, it's nice getting just to sit there and watch, another author talk about other authors and reading and enjoying what's out there, and just this smorgasbord of authors that are out there nowadays. Because you're right, you can't keep up. My friend in here, Linda from Linda's World of Books, we always joke that our TBR pile is going to eventually crush us. It's going to fall off our shelves and crush us. And I just say, that's okay. You know what? I'll just read my way out. So we're good.
There's only one way out. Let's start reading.
Start reading. Yeah, exactly. We have Working Man Reads here. Thanks, Josh, for coming in. We've got Epic Tales here.
Hey, Epic Tales.
Amelia, thank you so much.
How are you?
Get right on in. Thanks for coming, Andrew. We've got Kelly here. Thanks for coming by, Kelly. We do have a question here. I just got to see if I can find it here. How much would he say his writing has influenced his writing? So I'm assuming you're talking about your mentor there that ran that class, Epic. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming so.
I'll just jump into that. I mean, I think more than I initially realized. When I first started writing, or at certain points, I didn't see the influences. I was just like, oh, I'm just doing my own thing, and my own thing is kind of unusual. But as I started learning more and thinking more about it, and getting older, I would see the influences, even if they aren't in an amazingly direct way. Like two of the authors I always mention, because they're two of my favorites and they came to me early in life, were Tanith Lee and Lucius Shepard. And both of them influenced me in the ways that they brought something to me that, when I thought about it, it's essential to me, what I love as a reader, and why I keep writing and why I write in the first place. For Tanith Lee, that's simply like what I was saying as we started. Tanith Lee brought to me as a reader that sense that anything can happen in fiction and anything will. Like Tanith Lee's books they're all over the place in that amazing way. Like, is it science fiction? Is it fantasy? Is it historical? Is it horror? Is that person a bird? Is it a demon? Is it a man? Is it a human? Is it a snake? Are we on Earth? Are we in a simulation? And that was just, that no borders, no boundaries sort of things. Like, sort of like in Star Wars. Hey, we're in space, but we've got lightsabers and cool monsters. Like that's what Tanith Lee brought to me. And I'm glad I never found myself in a box with my fiction that way. And what Lucius Shepard brought to me was what we were talking about earlier on as well. You were kind enough to point out the settings and the details. And Lucius Shepard is that kind of writer as well. He writes a lot of his stuff is set in Central America, and it's very setting and very detail oriented. And after I read a Lucius Shepard story, especially as a teen, I feel like I've gone somewhere. I feel like I've gone on a trip. You know, I've gone through the jungle. I've gone to a place that I'd never been before, and it feels through the magic of Lucius Shepard's writing. I feel like I've done that, and that's something that I want as a reader. It's something I want out of the writing process, and that's also something I want my stories to deliver if I've done it right.
No, absolutely.
So I guess how much is an influence in writing? Yeah, in that long-winded way. Epic Tales. Good question.
Yes and no. There's parts of you, and then there is some influence in there. And you know, when I was talking about the description too, I have to point out you're not over wordy. So it's not like as you start to, you know, give these descriptions and start to build this world, it isn't like you're going to lose the reader because there's just too much filler in there. It's the perfect amount to be able to really draw you in and paint that picture. And you can see the scenery, even if it is mind bending in some way, you can see the scenery play out in your head while you're reading.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a lot of work. Trying to, I'll feel like I'll always have the danger of wanting to do too much or wanting to go too far. So that is something I've worked on is just trying to get it just right. And to hear that a reader feels like it's just right is really great to hear. So thank you for saying that.
No, absolutely. And they're not like any stories that you're going to come across, right? Like these are unique, these are raw, these are different from anything that I've really jumped into before. So that's also really hard to do with all the work that's out there now. It's hard to become or to write something or put something out there that's unique. And these stories, what I've read of your work is absolutely unique. And I have to keep popping it up because I really love the cover. And I can't thank you enough for sending me a copy.
Thank you. I'm so glad it got to you.
Oh, and it's so beautiful. It's got that like nice soft texture to it, and the whole formatting of it.
The cover artist. I'm getting to my camera. Staven Anderson. Hello to Staven Anderson, the cover artist who did a fantastic job, and Lev Press did a great job putting that book together.
Absolutely. And even though, I mean, the cover is very simplistic, I love it. And it tells you so much. If you were to dive into these stories, the cover will speak to you once you start to dive into these stories. It's absolutely gorgeous.
I'm just so impressed. I'm so impressed with the cover about it. It's simple. It's simple but layered. And really in love with the cover myself. So I'm glad the cover speaks to people.
Absolutely. So Jason does have a question here. He would like to know if you've ever thought of, or have you ever done your own workshop? And if not, have you ever considered doing one?
Hey, Jason. Excuse me as I tinker with my headphones here. Let's try to get the one ear on, one ear off. No, I'm going to fall over. I have not. I'd love to. I'd love to. I haven't. I'd love to teach. I do. I'm in a writers group, and over the years, I always exchange feedback with other writers. I think it's it's not the only way to learn. It's one way to learn. But like you all and like Jason, I'm so interested in the creative process that I'd love to at some point, but I don't have anything. Don't have anything concrete planned right now.
Not as of yet. Maybe in the future. Fingers crossed. Hopefully.
Yeah. An opportunity comes across. I definitely would do it.
So Epic does have another question for you. You guys are awesome. You guys are throwing questions up there. If I missed any, I'm sorry. He does want to know that I mentioned that it's not too wordy. Do you know how far to go, like what to include and not to include?
Wow. I don't. I don't know. I don't think I have a concise answer to that, fittingly enough. I guess what I will, to directly answer, no, I just don't know. I go by the guidance for me, and every writer is going to be different. But for me, I'm always working on the guidance that less is more, and I'm always working on the thought to be aware of a propensity to overwrite. I mean, for me, for myself, and for people in general. So, and I'm also very big on revisions. That's the part of writing. I revise a ton. So a lot of I might start out by overwriting and cutting back. And I also, as part of my drafting process, I do read it out loud to someone else if I can, to myself if I can't. And that's a good writing tip, because if you're reading something and you're stumbling over the words, or it's a mouthful, or if it's chunky when you're reading it out loud, it's just something, it helps. It helps. It helps you know that unknowable thing. Like, how do you know what's too much? And then sometimes, and then some of it has to simply do with the other thing that can't really be taught, is just sort of that confidence. I guess it's a confidence that comes from repetition. I think every artist and every writer has their own journey or struggle with confidence. And sometimes it's just like knowing, sometimes, at least I find in earlier drafts, or when I was a younger writer, I might say things 2 or 3 times, and just not having that subconscious confidence that, what I said does work. So, I don't know the how, but those are some observations in terms of that.
It just kind of comes as you go, as you learn, as you practice, and the more and more you write.
Yeah, and I think a good thing and a good piece of advice that if it works for a new writer or any writer is to exchange feedback with other writers. And here's the counterintuitive part of that. I believe, and I didn't come up with this, learned it from my teachers and other authors. I think the skills come online when you're critiquing someone else's work first. So yeah, it's great when you exchange feedback, because sometimes you do get really valuable things on your own work. But I think what's important about critiquing is you will learn those things you'll see them easier in other people's work. Like, you'll see my work and be like, oh, Daniel, that image, you got it right. Cut out the other 2 references of it. That image is right there. And then after you rinse and repeat 100 million times, you'll be able to internalize those skills on your own work. And that's the part, at least for me, that certainly came second, and it certainly came over a function of time.
Do you enjoy the editing process, the revisions, going over, polishing things up, or is it something that you absolutely despise?
Oh, I love it. That's the part that feels natural to me. I don't despise any part of it, but the more intimidating part for me is the blank page. Is getting it down from the head onto the page, because I do like to, before I even start to go on the page, I like to have the story in my head first, or have the story verbally. Like, I'd like to be able to be like, hey Nichi, I'm going to tell you, my next story is this, and I don't want to be able to pretty much be able to tell you the story, or while I'm doing something else, have that story in my head. Then it's a different. So I'm not figuring it out on the page. This is just me. Some people do figure it out on the page. For me, I definitely like to think about it first. Then when it comes down onto the page, that first draft, man, is it bad. Man, I'm not even sure if it's English. It's like doctor prescription. It's like left turn, monster, run. It's just such shorthand. It's just getting it there. And then I guess I like the revision process, because it's like, if I die, they'll see that I was a human and could write English, that I did write English.
Well, I can tell you, reading your work, I mean, if that's what the first, like empty page, first, puke on the page is like, you can't tell once you've gone through it and you've polished it. Not one bit.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a lot of work between here and there, or there and here.
Absolutely. Got to polish it until it's I'm awful though. I am like a perfectionist, and I'm the person that just keeps tinkering and changing and changing. So if I was to ever decide to write, it'd probably take about 20 years just to release one thing. So that's why I just don't ever do that.
Oh, I feel sounds like what I do there. I hear you.
Somebody would have to come up and just eventually just smack you over the head and say, "That's it, just do it, just put it out there."
That is part of it too. Yeah, no, I could see that happening too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jason has another question. Jason's just cracking them out here. I recently read a quote that says the real writing comes in revision and editing. Do you feel that is true?
So I have a nuanced response to that. I'm reluctant, and maybe this is just being a stickler for language. I'm reluctant at anything that can put people in a box or discourage them. So saying something like real writing, even though I tend to, for me, I feel agreeable about that quote, because for me, yeah, the magic or the writing really happens in revisions and editing. But I would never want to say that I feel that that's true or false, because I would never want that to stifle or potentially put someone on the wrong track when it's not true for them. Some people could be or are the total opposite. They have their instincts and they put it down, and it's just a draft or two, and that's where it is. And that's real writing. That's real writing too. I think that's rarer, and I think that's more, people are more gifted who have that, but it's still real writing for me. Yeah. So I'm just being a stickler with the words, but yeah, for me, it really happens with the revisions and editing. It's so rare that something on a first draft for me is something that will be able to communicate to other humans. It's just a different stage. It's me communicating with that part of me. It's just a step in the process. It's not meant to be read. I will say that I guess I'm talking a lot about that workshop. It's called the Clarion Writers Workshop, and I think I don't know if they keep their archives anymore, but they keep a copy of every story that went through that workshop. So some of my heroes, some of Lucia Shepard's first drafts are on file in there. Some of my first drafts of my first stories are there. So these awful things, they're in a library somewhere. I think it moved from Michigan to San Diego. Maybe, I'm not sure if the archives went to San Diego as well, but why they do that, I don't know. Probably maybe that is a good, I was just going to laugh with like, why do they do that? Like, to torture us and keep us humble. But no, I mean, maybe the lesson is, because I do remember one of the days of that workshop was going to see those first drafts of these great writers. And maybe it's a good thing to like remind new students, like, yeah, their first drafts suck too, even though that's not true. But, part of being a writer is, going through your process, even if it's the parts that we're not comfortable with or aren't our favorite.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Andreas does say that Kurt Vonnegut once gave the advice, if it's boring to you, it's boring to the reader.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. If you're bored and you're bored with your sentence, if you're just bored with the story or bored with the sentences, that's going to show up on the page. You can tell that. I can tell that when when I read beta reading or first drafts or other drafts of things, you could, especially when you know writers so well, or you just know fiction really well, and you can tell those parts. And my instructors, it seemed like magic, how a great editor or a great instructor can see that as well. And not only just see like where you were bored on the page, they could almost like do a psychological analysis of you through that. They could be like, hey, yeah, this is where you were bored. This is where you're engaged. I bet you like this in life. And another amazing story was like one of my editor instructors was like, this is what you're not writing about. This is what you're afraid to write to. And I was like, how the hell did you know that? But they have the instincts, and they've edited enough, and they've read enough where they do. So
yeah, absolutely. No, that's really cool. I really like that we've got another person that likes the rewriting here. This is new for me, because, when you have these conversations with the authors, a lot of times that editing process and the constant drafts is something that's kind of daunting and kind of like, oh, I don't want to go through that. So it's neat to find different authors that enjoy that.
Oh, it's both. Don't get me wrong. It's certainly, because I'm doing revisions right now of a novel length lyric, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we've got a road ahead of us. But I'm like, I'll enjoy it a page at a time, or it's definitely both those things.
You could probably recite your words, like your whole story, without even reading it. With how much you end up reading it, I'm sure.
Not yet.
No.
I wish I could. I once saw an author do that. Like, there are some authors who are just really theatrical and they have backgrounds in theater. And I once saw an author, as part of his reading, he closed the book and stepped in front of the podium and like really blurred the line between whether it was a true story or not. But whether he got them right or not, he definitely was it was a little one-man show of the story there. So I'd love to be good enough to do that someday, for sure.
That's incredible. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. What, like you said, whether he got it right or not, to be able to, I mean, the audience wouldn't know. They would just be in awe of him. Wow.
Yeah. I'm not, it's not a backhanded, it's just me trying to figure out the magician's trick. Like, it seemed completely smooth and effortless and affecting, for sure, like to unsettling in that right way.
No worries, Lewis. Thanks for popping in. Keep on writing. Lewis says he can't stay. He's on a roll with his writing right now. Maybe you've inspired him a bit, Daniel.
We know the feeling there. Happy writing, Lewis.
Yeah. If it's going, it's going. I want to touch base a little bit, not only on the title of your collection here. As somebody had said earlier, it is a fantastic title. The title of the individual stories, I love them. Were they hard to come up with, or did you just know as soon as you started writing it, this is what I'm going to title this?
I think I'm trying to think, and as I think about that, I know I do pay attention to it. I do give it some thought. I do know when it's wrong, and you do know when it's right. Like, I tend to like some of those wordier titles. Like, I'm fond of the title "How to Stay Afloat When Drowning."
Mm-hmm.
In one of my other books, it's called The Wish Mechanics. There's a longer title. It's called "How to Make Love and Not Turn to Stone." And I guess one of the pieces of advice I got early on about titles was from one of my instructors, a great author, Karen Joy Fowler. And I'll probably mangle the advice that she gave, but it was something about, she said a title has to be like a crown. And okay, that's sort of a cliche sort of thing, but what she said she meant by it is that the title has to work, and not has to, a good title or her kind of title, and these are things I would always aim for. They work in two ways. One, it has to be catchy enough for you to be interested in the story. Mm-hmm. So it works on the primary level because it's the first thing. But when you're finished with the story, the Karen Joy Fowler kind of story that she was title that she was talking about, she says it's a lens that then changes the way that you look at the story after you're done with it. So it has to be like, okay, yeah, that catchy title, and then, oh, I didn't think of that title that way, and now I see what he or she meant by it, or, oh, that makes me think about it. So it's rare to get a title that does that. Do all titles have to do that? No. It's just sort of a fun, multi-layered, extra level kind of thing there that sometimes I try to do or try to achieve.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the titles now, like Goodnight. I'm probably going to butcher how you say some of these. Goodnight Kookaburra. Is that correct? Did I write that down? I can't even read my own writing here, Daniel.
It's a terrible thing for a writer or a host. Is that one of my X-Men powers is the power of mispronunciation. I can't say anything. But I think it is Kookaburra. Yeah, that Australian bird.
Yeah, the bird. Yeah. The Monkey Coat. I loved that title. How to Stay Afloat When Drowning. We've mentioned that. Cloud Cloudland Earthbound. I really like that one as well. Between
Oh,
Our
thank
Earth
you.
and Their Moon, that was one of my favorite stories. Um,
Oh, thank you.
and then Rum Punch is Going Down was one of my favorite stories too, obviously, because I had made that joke right when we started that
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna have a cup and I was gonna make sure it wasn't see through. And if anybody asked what I was drinking, I was gonna say that I was drinking rum punch, but
I
I
wish
forgot.
I wish I had my act together. Yeah, at one point I was like, I need to make a an Underworld Dreams drink list or a playlist, like a drink menu. But of course, it never happens. Yeah, definitely rum punch will have to be on that menu at some point. In a better world, we'll all be drinking rum
Rum
punch
punch.
at some point, some convention somewhere someday. We'll have a
Will
rum
have to
punch
happen.
gathering. Yeah, instead of like some conventions have the coffee clatches, we can have our rum punch.
Rum punch. I forgot. I was planning. I had the whole idea. I was gonna have my glass and I was gonna say, I hope everyone's got their rum punch for this live show. But you think of these things and I forget. I just don't have a very silly bone in my body, I guess. And I So Jason does have another question. He says that he struggles so much with getting the first draft done. He usually hates that when he's writing. Do you have any advice getting past that first draft?
Well, what pops into my mind is like whether you love him or hate him, listen to the great Neil Gaiman. And Neil
Mm.
Gaiman, if he, one of the pieces of advice, James saying, "I drink rum punch." Cheers, James. Yeah, this podcast is sponsored by Rum Punch. But yeah,
Yeah, we need
back
that.
to getting yeah, let's get our corporate sponsor. But getting past that first draft is any which way you can, but finish it. Because Neil Gaiman's he says if I'm going to give you only one piece of advice, I believe he says we learn from finishing things. So it's like just fight through it, just get it done. A first draft doesn't have to be anything other than being complete. It could be great, it could suck, it could change, it could stay, it could go. But we really, as authors, learn by finishing them. So we all struggle with it, but just get it done. Do it however you can. Trick yourself. Whatever. I don't want to say like what works, but like find out what works for you and keep doing it or keep adjusting it. Right? Like so, there's so many writing strategies out there. Some of them are completely wrong for me, but other people swear by them. Try different things, adjust as needed, but get those drafts done.
Jason says he's drinking some beer. Does that count? Yeah, I say that counts. But
Sure.
apparently James says as long as it's not light, Jason. It's very true. I agree. Kind of get that first draft puked on the page, and then, like you said, change it as you go. The whole thing could be rewritten at the end, but as long as you get it finished, that's really good. That's really good advice. Instead of sitting there and tweaking it as you go and changing everything and ruining the whole point of the story.
Yeah, I mean that there's a time and place for editing and revisions as well. So it's not just one rule, but yeah, I think Neil is really big on don't abandon ship. Don't abandon them.
Absolutely. If you're sitting at the computer or the desk wherever you write, and you're having a hard time, and you're not necessarily hitting that writer's block, but just you're not having any success with the words, how do you get your creative juices flowing again?
Oh, sometimes I just know when to abandon ship. Like sometimes I know when I'm in the zone, and I know when I'm pushing. And look, sometimes another piece of advice. My advice is this is why I'm not Neil Gaiman, because I'm so much less elegant. This might be one that I coined. Like I call it keep your ass in the chair. Sometimes it's like you just have to like, all right, just keep your ass in the chair, have that ass in chair time. And that's may or may not be such good advice. It's good advice in the fact that these stories aren't going to write themselves, and so much of writing is just having your ass in that chair. the wrinkle in that is, sometimes I just know when I'm writing and I'm like, oh, I know I'm just phoning it in, and I know this is going to be gone, or this is going to be, and sometimes you have to know when not to, I've forgotten the question that was pending on that.
Just how you get the creative juices flowing if you've hit that rut.
Oh, I don't know. I guess, things have changed for me. I used to be, be younger and healthier and have so much more energy. I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna write and have everything perfect. I'm gonna write in these marathon sessions, or I'm gonna do this or do that. And then there are some times where I wrote where my health wasn't good, or I wasn't feeling well, and that adjusted to writing in small bursts, in 5-minute sessions instead of 5-hour sessions. So I guess the bigger picture on that is a cliche thing to say, but be kind to yourself in whatever way being kind to yourself is. If that means like write for 5 minutes, pet the cat for 5 minutes, write for 5 minutes, clean the house for 10 minutes, write for 5 minutes, play your video game for 10, whatever it is, do it. There's nothing, wrong with that, right? So I'm so big on that, especially in this world of short attention spans and distractions. Sometimes I'm like, well, I'm not gonna fight it. I'm not gonna give up. I'm still gonna do it. Now you made me recall some other advice I've given out. Sometimes, so if you're really in that bad place, I have a piece of advice that I give out that sounds funny, but it's actually pretty effective. So commit to doing something incredibly small. And you may even joke, but I'll say like, well, commit to doing 1 page a day, or 1 paragraph a day, or the best one is one sentence, or even just commit to doing 1 sentence. And I think that's good advice, because hey, why not write a story 1 sentence at a time? It has the benefit, it keeps continuity going, even if your world is falling apart. And sometimes we can't, but if our worlds are falling apart, or like me, you've tried to write when you were going through health problems, or just stress or life problems, if you can carve out that small amount of time, it can be a sanctuary or an oasis, and it can expand. Again, there's nothing absolute, but that's just perhaps a piece of advice to in the tool belt of possible pieces of advice there. Nothing's set in stone.
It's great advice, though. Anything's better than nothing, right?
For sure.
Do you find your life experiences, things that you've gone through yourself or with family or friends, affects your writing, or changes your story, or influences your story in any way?
I try not to let that be the case directly. Like when I was in school once, there was like some kid in class who was just like writing about us and everyone, and I was just like, oh, cringe, how awful. I will never do that. Never do that to myself or my friend. But I guess what we what we are as people is everything we've ever done and seen. So things are an influence. I prefer to try to have it come out in that indirect way, either a subconscious way, or if I find that it's intentionally happening, to see how it can be changed around myself. But I think I've heard advice to do just that, to write what I've heard that advice go around, and I can't say that's bad advice.
No, absolutely. We do have a question here from James, and I love when James asks this question. It's such a good one. So how much of the story is already completed in your head before you put pen to paper?
for me, I like to have a lot of it, quote unquote, completed, and not completed in terms of on a sentence level, but I would like to. I'm the sort of writer that I want to know. I want to be at least be able to tell the story as if I was a verbal storyteller. Like, hey, yeah, there's this story about this woman, and she got her grandmother's coat, and her daughter in there. They're not sure if it's haunted or if it's just they're kind of going crazy. Yeah, and then there was these murders started happening, right? So I want to be able to know that and be able to tell you that before I put pen to paper. That being said, at least for me, putting pen to paper is so much different than telling you the story but I like to know that story so I can focus on that sentence level and those words, because that's the harder part for me. So I'd like to have a lot of it done. As every writer will always tell you, things always change. Characters talk for themselves. Things change, but at least that starting point, I don't like to figure it out on the page. Although I do like to have enough room, and I'm never really set in stone. Sometimes it's like, it's the exact opposite is happening, or it's not working. But I at least initially like to start with a lot of it. Some people are the exact opposite. They will just some great writers have given the exact opposite of advice. Like, yeah, you just pick a character and make sure they're interesting and just follow them around and write about it. I'm like, yeah, that's great. If you're
How?
if you're that right, how? If you're great like you, sure. I'd be like, hey, yeah, there's my cat. Yeah, she won't come on stage right now. Gonna be bothering me for that food in a minute. Here's my story.
It's very true. That would be really hard. I've heard of people that they know the beginning and they know the end. And I said, well, how do you fill in the inside? All the middle parts. Where did that come from? I don't know. It just came, and I'm thinking, how could you do that?
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, I at a very minimum, I would like to have that if I could only have a couple of things to know, because when again, nothing is set in stone, but at least on a craft level, a lot of what I'll call revising is figuring out what the start point of the story is and what the end point of the story is. And at least for me, sometimes that is counterintuitive, or that's not, it takes a lot of figuring out to feel natural.
Well, you guys, this is just talent. I'm telling you guys, everyone watching, whether you're watching now or watching afterwards, this is just talent, because I couldn't do what anyone's doing. I couldn't do what Daniel's doing or any of these authors. So this is why I call you guys celebrities, because what you guys do is incredible.
It's an amazing time, because there are just so many. There's so many great authors out there. I'll hold up a book. Probably her name is no secret to anyone here, but Ellen Datlow, an amazing editor. Any of the names in one of her best horror of the year, you can just point on that, and you'll get that kind of writing, like what Nikki's talking about. So. Yeah.
Or so Daniel Braum. As you promote others, I'll promote you, okay, Daniel?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Would it be unfair of me to ask if you have a favorite story from this particular collection?
No, not at all, except I'm sure I'm asked that on every interview, and I cannot remember what I say from one time. So I hope I say a different one each time, right? That would be
what
be
you're
fantastic.
In the mood for.
Yeah. I think last time I said How to Stay Afloat When Drowning was my favorite. So I'll just pick a different one. I'll pick a different one today. I guess I was thinking about the short story Pollen Car, and I guess why I'll say that's my favorite today is maybe it was far from one of my first stories written, but maybe it was the first or one of the first stories written after I realized I had certain realizations, and had certain realizations that I had found certain confidences. And what I'm saying by that is a lot of my quote unquote career, I think I was writing in the dark. I didn't realize I was necessarily writing horror until certain markets started publishing me. You know, I have a lot of gratitude. When I first started getting published in Cemetery Dance magazine, which is a horror publication, I wasn't sure, you know, that I was a horror writer, and I knew very little about horror. So, you know, after I started my self-education about horror and the vast umbrella that it covers, like there's so much, you know, there's all the splatter and the gore, but then there's the psychological, or there's body, like there's so many different things. And I heard Peter Straub talking at a convention once about an author named Robert Aikman. And I'd never heard of him before. I'd never heard of the stories. And Peter Straub was, what he was talking about in the story was the swords, was really resonating with me. And Peter Straub was like, just go, told the audience, not me directly. He said, go into the dealer's room, buy this book, read the swords, and welcome to the next level. And I'm like, well, that's bold. I'm going to do that. And I did that. And for me, it was true. You know, I read the swords and I listened to what Peter Straub was saying. And I understood that was my key, my path to understanding weird fiction, to understanding strange tales, and understanding that there was a name for what I was doing. I'm like, oh my God, I'm nowhere near this Straub or Aikman, but that's what I want. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm calling it something different, or I'm not calling it. So Paul and Carr was the first story I wrote after realizing that, yeah, it's okay to have things, you know, some of it sounds kind of silly because it's unobvious, but I didn't know. But yeah, it's okay to have quiet horror. It's okay to have ambiguities in there. It's okay for stories to be about atmosphere or mood. And I equate that with Robert Aikman. There's so many others, Shirley Jackson, and so many others who do it, but that was my thing. And so I'll pick Paul and Carr as my favorite because that was the first one where I really had that online for me.
That is a good one. And it's true. Horror is, like you said, there's so many subgenres within the genre. I have to thank Jason for really helping get me into horror, because when I first started out on here, everything was YA fantasy, YA contemporary. That was the two main things. And I had tried a lot of different horror pieces, and I said to him, like, I just don't know if it's for me. And I said, it doesn't really like scare me or like leave me feeling anything. And he says, well, you have to find your subgenre within this genre, because it's never ending. And as soon as he said that, and as soon as I found the indie world and the small press world, it was like everything just exploded. And now you just can't stop reading it. And now it's been 4 years.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's incredible. And your stories, the atmosphere on them, I am telling you, the eerie, the different, the raw, the unique, it is definitely there.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that's the thing about horror, is that it's sneaky. It doesn't have to be in its own book. Like you said, YA or fantasy. Often horror is so interesting because possibly unlike the other genres, it could kind of be in the same passenger seat as your YA dystopian, because sometimes horror is more than just a ghost or more than just a killer. Horror can be like a mode or an atmosphere or a mood or a thing that is also happening side by side with a science fiction tale or a YA tale or dystopian tale.
Oh, absolutely.
So many. I just see horror everywhere. Even I guess it's not. Maybe it's in vogue. I don't know. I can't tell whether it's in vogue or in or out. Whether it's in or out, it's still present. You know, the things that we call horror, that's called horror, are very much present in our storytelling.
Oh, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's many people that say, I would never touch horror. I would never read it. You know, and then they'll share their favorite book, and you're like, there's elements of horror.
Why not? And you know what? Why not? Some people are not into that or angry at it. I'm just like, hey, if it reaches people, I know it's like the big thing, like, oh, just call it a thriller, call it this, call it that. I'm like, yeah, call it what you want, but
yeah, exactly. Although what they don't realize is so much of what they're already reading has so much elements of horror and dark
hey,
fiction
Katie
in
reads. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I was one of those people as well. Yeah, I didn't realize it as
Yeah.
well.
I mean, even like realistic horror, you can read, even some historical fictions that are based around, real life events that happened, history that was horrifying or just absolutely horrific.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So Nichi gave me a heads up that this would happen. I'm not sure if everyone is still with us, but she said she'll be right back, and she is right back. Thanks to our sponsor, Stream. I was just explaining that you knew this was going to happen, and I was about to say thanks to our sponsor, StreamYard, but thanks to our sponsor, Rum Punch. Any corporate sponsors, any corporate rum sponsors want to sponsor Nichi's channel? This is your golden opportunity.
I just had to get a refill. Refill. That's all.
The new clear. You expect it to be red, but it's really clear. It's Nichi's Rum Punch, sponsored by.
You'll think you're drinking water until you're on the bed passed out. So
yeah,
it's true. I thought StreamYard would have this fixed by now, but pardon me, apparently not. Yeah, Rum Punch. Everyone's going to have to go and get Rum Punch now. That's all we're going to be talking about all weekend. Did you pick up some Rum Punch? That was one, being the last part in the book there, in the collection, that one really stuck with me, and how they were going around calling him, hey, Rum Punch. Hey, Rum Punch. That's a great nickname to have. How about your family, friends? Are they supportive of what you write and what you do, whether they read what you put out, or whether they just, give you that time and space to be able to do your thing and get your writing in?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so lucky to have great family and great friends. Yeah, my family, even though they're not super big readers or super big into horror, they're very, very supportive of me in that way. And I'm just really lucky that a lot of my friends are fellow writers and like fellow teachers. I learned so much by reading other authors and by interacting with them, and I'm also very fortunate, to have the friendship of great authors who I've just learned so much from, and even if it's not learning, just to have that support. And so I'll always look for opportunities to do the same, for sure.
Well, that's good. That's always great to hear that, you've got that support behind you and people are helping you do your thing, because us readers need it. We need to have this stuff to be able to binge read to all hours of the night.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to make our funeral pyres and our crushing to with. We hate them, but we love it.
Absolutely. Okay, here's a question for you, and this one's a little more on the fun side. Living or dead, who would you love to be able to have dinner with? And you don't have to pick just one person. You could have a full table.
Oh, living or dead. Oh, so I have to. Am I gonna get multiple choices, like a living person or a dead person, or I can just pick? So
You can just pick.
I'm gonna start picking dead people then.
I like how you go straight there. That's where I would go.
Yeah, I'm like, living or dead. I'm like, is there even a question? I pick dead. Oh, I have to. It's like, oh, it's not a choice between living and dead. Oh wow. Oh wow. I guess maybe now I'm just gonna go right to the great Lucius Shepard, who is no longer with us, and I only met him as as a fan. I got an autograph or two, and unlike some of my colleagues who knew him, and so I never got to talk to a great influence that way. Now I'm trying to think of like a great, like dead, like I don't know, maybe like a great Australian cowboy or pirate or something like that, to hear some great stories that went down with the ship or is buried out there in the desert or something.
Ooh, maybe it could spark a new story too.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, stories are everywhere. I'd love to take one that's buried somewhere and bring it back somehow if I had that chance.
If somebody ever asked me that, I'd be like, I'd go straight to, who are my influences that I would love to be able to speak with that are now past. Because, I mean, if they're still living, you still have that potential, that opportunity that maybe
Right.
one day you'll be able to speak with them. So talk to the people that you can't talk to anymore, right?
Absolutely.
Well, perfect. I don't want to take up too much of your time, Daniel. I've already taken up an hour of your time. If anyone has any questions left that they haven't popped into the chat, make sure you pop those up so we can get those in and we don't take up his whole entire Friday evening.
Oh, I'm having a great time, but thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. I'll make sure nobody's got any other questions here before I let you sneak off.
At all.
Oh, a great biography. Yeah.
He doesn't. I don't think he has a biography yet. There are some. There is a book or a small book by Jack Dan, the author Jack Dan. It's not a biography, but it is a reflection or a reminiscence. And I'm told that another a part 2 of his greatest hits, or is a part 2. Maybe it was even you that was telling me this. I can't remember who, but I heard that there's some Lucia Shepard on the way, but don't quote me on it. It's not coming from the source there. But
fingers crossed though. That would be great.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I don't have any other questions coming in, so one last one from me, Daniel. If you could say one thing about this collection to try to potentially bring on future readers, what would it be?
Well, I would say it's a great humanistic stories. As much as these are stories about the underworld or the other world or the supernatural, at its heart, they're really heartfelt stories about real people. So that's where you'll be able to relate to them. Is my one pitch. So I hope if you do pick up the book, I do hope you enjoy it. If you've already picked up the book or if you've read it, thank you so much. Appreciate the support and appreciate all your kind words, Nichi. Thank you so much for reading the book and for promoting it and saying all these kind things. I do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for sending me a copy. It was such a delight when you sent it, and then I wasn't sure if I was going to get it in time, and I did. So that's where I got really excited. And of course, just as I say this, we do have some comments that have popped up. If you don't mind
no worries.
If you don't mind answering a couple more.
I've got a couple coming out. Probably the next one. I have a story in Vestarian magazine. It's going to be coming out, I believe, in the next issue. So probably that's going to hit in 2021. That one's called 29 Palms in Reverse, and that's coming out from Vestarian. That's probably the most recent one. I have sold a couple more stories, but I think they might be either later in the year or 2022. And speaking of 2022, I was talking about it with Jason. I have a novel that is coming out from Lev Press as well. That's going to be a full year from now, but that's called Serpent of the Eighth Wind, and that is coming out in summer of 2022. And you mentioned you liked the story Between Our Earth and Their Moon. So it is the same character, who is the protagonist in there. It's a full novel with him. He's reluctant to use the term supernatural detective, but maybe that's what he is. It's a one long story from our supernatural detective from that one there. So
I'm gonna have to. I'll wait patiently for that one and keep my eyes out for that one then.
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to come back or get an advance copy to you, to Jason, and come back on your shows if you'll have me
Yeah.
when that happens, for sure.
Maybe we'll have to have like a big group chat. Maybe Jason, you and
Yeah,
I can all go on together and chat all about
that
it.
would that would be fun, and we know what we'll be drinking at that point.
Rum punch. And Braden says this gentleman is speaking all kinds of wisdom. Aspiring writers would be wise to heed his words, and I agree.
Well,
It's been such a pleasure getting to talk to you and get to know more about
it's great.
you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for. Oh.
Sorry, is there any chance we will see your last novel return to print?
Yes. So yeah, that's interesting. I think Andreas is talking about it's a book called The Serpent Shadow, and that just has an interesting history to it. So it was acquired by Cemetery Dance eBooks. So it came out as an ebook first. So it's still out. It's still available as an ebook. I'm not a big ebook reader if left to my own natural devices. Cemetery Dance is they also have the rights. They have the full rights to it. So they are going to be putting out different editions of it just in due time. It's on their schedule. Cemetery Dance is worth waiting for. So yes, as soon as I know when that comes, there are print editions, hardcover print editions of The Serpent Shadow if you must wait for a print book that is coming. And the funny thing about The Serpent Shadow is, a rose is a rose by any other name. It's right on the borderline between a novella and a novel. So, it's like just under 40,000 words, right? So it's a really long novella, really short novel. So I think technically it's a novella. So Servant of the Eighth Winds is going to technically be my first novel. Yeah, The Serpent Shadow sort of feels like a novel, but it was a novella. And yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, you can get it as an ebook right now if you're an ebooker, or in due time we'll let everyone know when that's coming out in print from Cemetery Dance.
That's exciting. And yes, like you said, Cemetery Dance, it's worth waiting for.
Oh yeah. I'm not to be flip about that, but I'm pretty excited because Cemetery Dance is they're my school of horror. That's how I learned, and I think a lot of other people as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Jason said he's on it. For the next chat, we can do a group chat, and we'll make sure we have the rum punch.
Yeah, we'll do it. I'm in.
And Andreas, is this conversation much appreciated. Thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on and talking with me and just having a blast and getting to know more about you. And I'm gonna pop it up here again. There. Go and pick up a copy of Underworld Dreams, a collection of short stories. They're fantastic, and you're gonna love not only the title, but you're gonna love the title of the stories that are inside as well. And sit down and just binge, because that's what I did.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for anyone that's come and hung out with us while we're live, and anyone that's coming by. Sorry, LJ, we're just sneaking off now. But yeah, anybody that's watching this after the fact as well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, and we'll do it again sometime.
We'll do it again soon. Take care, everyone. Thanks again.
See you.